I never thought the sound of a text notification could destroy a marriage. But that night, at 2:17 a.m., my husband's phone buzzed, lighting up the room with a glow so innocent it felt cruel. I wasn't supposed to be awake. He thought I had taken my sleeping pills. He thought he was safe. He always thought he was smarter than me. I reached for the phone before logic could catch up to instinct. A name flashed across the screen. Ava. I froze. Ava isn't some random coworker. She isn't some gym acquaintance. She is my best friend. My maid of honor. My sister, in everything except blood. The woman who held my hand through my pregnancy tests and cried with me when I miscarried. The person I would have died for. The text read, "I miss your hands on me. Same place tomorrow?" My breath caught like something sharp inside my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone at his sleeping face like the rage in my blood begged me to. I sat there, motionless, feeling my whole world rearrange itself around betrayal like a house sinking silently into the ground. To tell this story, I need to go back to when everything still looked perfect from the outside. We were the couple people envied. Married 8 years. Stable jobs. A cozy house with mismatched mugs and weekend farmers market routines. Love that looked boring in the best way. And Ava, always there. Movie nights, double dates, vacations. She knew everything about us. Or maybe the better truth is she knew enough to break us. The first red flag was small. Annoyingly small. He started coming home later, blaming work stress, claiming the fuse box needed repair at the office, the supply order arrived late, the contractor didn't show. Mundane excuses, so ordinary they felt believable. Then came the gym membership. He hates the gym. He always said sweating indoors is for people who fear living. But suddenly he needed it for stress relief. And then there was Ava. She started acting off around me. Less talkative. Overly sweet. The kind of sweetness that tastes like spoiled fruit disguised with sugar. I brushed it off. People get weird sometimes. Friends go through things. I never imagined she was going through my husband. But the universe isn't subtle with women like me. It leaves breadcrumbs, hoping maybe, just maybe, I'll stop romanticizing loyalty long enough to see the truth. There were whispers in my gut weeks before my brain caught up. His cologne lingering long after he left the room. Her lipstick shade on my bathroom counter when she hadn't been over. His sudden obsession with looking good. Her sudden availability to help him pick a birthday gift for me. I laughed. I trusted. I kept loving. And then came the text at 2:17 a.m. I watched him sleep. His face peaceful like a child's. The same face that kissed me every morning and promised forever. I didn't wake him. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I slipped out of bed, walked to the kitchen, made a cup of tea even though my hands shook so badly I spilled boiling water on the counter. I stared at the steam as if answers were hidden in vapors. I wanted to scream, to smash plates, to break something so loudly it would match the shatter inside me. But rage is loud only when the heart isn't bleeding. Mine was drowning silently. I decided I needed proof. Not screenshots. Not confrontation. Physical, undeniable proof, the kind that would burn their lies to ash. So the next day, I did something I never imagined myself doing. I told him I was leaving town to visit my mother overnight. He kissed my forehead, told me to drive safe, and smiled like a man in love. Meanwhile, Ava texted me, "Girl, give him a break. He's been working so hard. He told me you guys were having a rough patch." I believed her at the time. Because loyalty makes fools of women who believe in forever. I didn't go to my mother's. I parked near the gym. The gym he suddenly loved. The gym I never once saw sweat on his shirt for. And I waited. Hours passed. The kind of hours where time tastes like regret and every minute cuts deeper. Then he arrived. Not alone. Ava stepped out of the passenger side of his car. She looked beautiful. That casual, effortless beauty she always had, like sunshine trusted her. They laughed together. Too familiar. Too comfortable. She touched his arm, and he didn't flinch. He held the door open for her. My husband never remembered to do that for me. I felt my heart fall apart piece by piece. But I stayed.
I watched.
I waited. And when they didn't go inside the gym, when they instead walked behind the building to a back staircase, disappearing from view, I realized reality is far crueler than suspicion. Suspicion hurts. Proof kills. I should have left.
I should have walked away right then.
But there's a moment between knowing and breaking where your soul demands answers your heart should never hear. I followed, each step heavier than the last. My pulse loud enough to drown the world. I didn't see them at first. I heard them. His voice low, hers breathy. Whispered promises I used to hear. The sound of lips meeting. The soft moan that stabbed me where vows used to live. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply stepped forward, and they froze like animals caught in headlights. His face drained of color. Hers twisted into guilt so quick it looked almost rehearsed.
My husband stammered something.
I don't even remember the words. Something pathetic. Something small. Ava begged me to listen. She said it wasn't what it looked like. I laughed. A sound sharp enough to slice the air. And then I walked away, because sometimes silence is the cruelest revenge. But this isn't the end. You think the betrayal is the story?
No.
The twist came 2 days later. When Ava showed up at my door crying, confessing that yes, they had been together, but it wasn't love. It wasn't passion. It was revenge. Revenge against me.
Why?
Because years ago, she claimed I stole the man she loved. A man she never once told me she had feelings for.
Un man ou chose me.
She waited 8 years to break my life because she couldn't handle losing. And here's the final cut. My husband didn't deny it. He said he felt pressured into the affair, that he thought maybe he had chosen wrong back then, that he was confused, that maybe they had a connection I never understood. He didn't fight for me. He didn't fight for us. He let our entire life burn just to avoid feeling guilty. And in that moment, I realized the story wasn't about her betrayal. It was that the man I loved never really loved me enough to protect us. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply looked at him one last time and said, with the calm of a woman reborn, "You two deserve each other." Now here's where you come in. What would you do if your best friend spent years plotting to take your husband, and your husband let her? I wish I could tell you that after saying those words, I walked out gracefully, chin high, heart untouched like some movie heroine who refuses to cry over spilled love. But reality isn't cinematic. It's messy.
Ugly.
It smells like coffee gone cold on the kitchen counter and feels like silence heavy enough to choke you. I shut the front door behind her, behind him, behind whatever version of my life they thought they ruined, and then I slid down to the floor and broke. I don't even know how long I sat there. Minutes.
Hours.
Grief doesn't follow clocks. It crawls through time, slow and suffocating. I kept replaying everything, every laugh we shared, every moment I thought we were unshakably solid, every secret I told Ava thinking she was my vault, not my viper. The irony? I used to call her my soulmate. Life has a sick sense of humor. But eventually the heartbreak turned into something else. Not rage. Something older. Sharper. More patient. Something like quiet fury mixed with clarity. Because here's the part one didn't tell you before. I had secrets too. You think I was just blindsided?
No.
I had doubts long before that text. I saw the late-night gym bag and the sudden cologne. I noticed the change in his eyes when Ava walked into a room. I pretended not to see it because I thought love meant loyalty, even to my own delusion. And while I didn't cheat, not emotionally, not physically, I did prepare. Quietly.
Carefully.
You don't survive betrayal by accident. Sometimes survival is a habit learned from childhood. My parents split when I was 10. My mom used to say, "Never let someone be your whole world. If they walk away, what's left?" I built a world outside him. A world he never bothered to notice. So I got up off that kitchen floor. I wiped my face. I made tea again, and this time I didn't spill a drop. Then I opened my laptop. And I logged into something he never knew existed. My legal escape plan. I had spoken to a lawyer months earlier when the intuition whispers started scratching at my sanity. Not because I was sure, because I refused to ever be powerless again. I pulled up the folder labeled insurance. The prenuptial addendum he forgot he signed when he thought signing papers meant love, not protection. The digital files of his quiet bank withdrawals. The messages he didn't know synced to our shared cloud. Receipts.
Dates.
Details. I wasn't planning to use any of it, not until Ava. She turned my heartbreak into resolve. Betrayal is an earthquake, everything shakes. But it also reveals what in your life is built on foundations strong enough to survive. Spoiler, they weren't. But I was. The next morning, I walked into his home office. He looked up like a ghost who realized the living can see him.
We need to talk, I said.
He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand.
No excuses. No justifications.
His shoulders slumped. He wasn't powerful anymore. He was small. Afraid. Cowardice changes a man's face. I slid the divorce papers across the desk. I already filed electronically. All you need to do is sign. He blinked, stunned. When did you? It doesn't matter. We're done. Then I watched something fascinating happen. He got angry. Not sorry. Not broken. Angry. Like a man who only mourns losing control, not love. You can't just leave after one mistake. One mistake. He said it like he bumped a stranger's car door in a parking lot. Not like he detonated a life. I laughed. A mistake is kissing someone once and regretting it. A mistake isn't months of secrets and planning and lying in my bed while she waited in yours.
He didn't speak.
Because there's no comeback to truth spoken without shaking.
He signed.
His hand trembled. Not from grief, from fear. He finally understood he lost something. Not me. His safety net. And then came the best part. The part one didn't plan, but fate delivered anyway. As I collected the papers, his phone buzzed. He didn't move to check it, but the screen lit up face up on the desk. A new message. Not from Ava. From another woman. Another secret. Another betrayal layered inside the first like poison inside sugar. The message read, I can't stop thinking about last night. Are you sure she won't find out? I stared at it. Then at him. He panicked. That's nothing. I swear. And there it was. The truth that turned my heartbreak into liberation. He wasn't stolen. He wasn't seduced. He wasn't misled. He was just a liar. A man who didn't stumble, but practiced betrayal like a language he was fluent in. All those nights, I thought he was tired, stressed, distant. He was just busy being someone else everywhere, except with me. And suddenly, everything in my body unclenched. I didn't lose him. I was freed from him. I walked out of that house with nothing but my purse and a calmness that felt holy. He called my name.
Once. Twice.
But you don't answer ghosts. I didn't look back. I drove away from my old life, feeling like the air outside tasted new, like grief and rebirth mixed together. But here's where you probably expect me to say I healed, I traveled, I found myself. Maybe I will. But this isn't a happiness arc yet. This is still the descent. Because 2 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, expecting spam. Instead, a woman's voice whispered, trembling, I think your husband lied to me too. And that's when I learned I wasn't the only one. Not even close. My story wasn't just betrayal. It was the opening scene of something bigger. Something darker. Something I never expected. And that is where things really began to unravel. Tell me, do you want to know what happened when we all confronted him together? I didn't answer her at first. I just sat there holding the phone to my ear, staring at the wall like it could explain how my life had turned into a nightmare with an expanding cast list. The woman on the other end, breath shaking, whispered again, Please, I need to talk to you. I closed my eyes. My voice felt foreign when I finally spoke. Meet me at the cafe on Birch Street in an hour. I hung up before she could say more. I didn't know why I agreed. Curiosity? Justice? Some twisted need for validation that I wasn't crazy, that he really was the monster I now believed he was? Maybe all of it. I arrived early, sat by the window, fingers wrapped around a mug that kept going cold because I kept forgetting to drink. Every time the door chimed, my heart jumped. Then she walked in. She was younger than me, early 20s maybe. Soft face, nervous hands, like life hadn't punched her nearly enough yet. She spotted me instantly. Pain recognizes pain, and sat down across from me like she was afraid I would vanish if she blinked. "I'm Emily," she murmured. Her voice cracked on her own name. "You don't know me, but I didn't know he was married. He told me you were separated." Separated. That word hit like a brick. Not for what it meant, but because he had already rehearsed the line, maybe planning a life where I didn't exist before I even caught on. "How long?" I asked. She swallowed hard. 7 months. 7 months. I felt my pulse in my teeth. That meant he was cheating on me with Emily while cheating on me with Ava. That wasn't love gone wrong. That was pathology. She slid her phone toward me. Messages. Pictures. Him, smiling the same smile he used on me, telling her she was special, saying he'd choose her when the time was right. I wasn't shocked anymore. Shock had expired. Now there was only clarity. "Did he promise you a future?" I asked. She nodded. "He said you were controlling, that you trapped him, that you were the reason he felt dead inside." My breath hitched. Not because of the lie, because I suddenly wondered how many times I had apologized for problems he caused, how often I shrank so he could feel big. Emily looked at me with terrified eyes. "I didn't know. I swear. When I found out you were still living together, I confronted him and he blocked me."
Blocked.
Like she was an inconvenience. Like Ava was a game. Like I was a home to retreat to when he got bored. But here's where the universe tilted again. Emily pulled in a shaky breath and whispered, "It's not just me." My fingers froze around my mug. "What do you mean?" She leaned forward, voice dropping to a tremble. "There are others." I felt dizzy. "How many?" She shook her head helplessly. "I only know about 2 more. But I think there's more." My heartbeat went strangely calm. Not panic, purpose. "Give me everything," I said. She slid screenshots across the table like evidence in a crime scene. There were names,
Dates.
messages to 2 other women, one he met at the gym, one from his office. He had turned infidelity into a lifestyle, a rotation, a parallel universe where I didn't exist unless he needed stability. Emily looked up at me, eyes glassy.
I'm sorry.
"I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you'd hate me." Hate her?
No.
The only person I hated lived under the same roof as me and still thought getting caught meant losing one woman, not unraveling a web. I exhaled slowly. "You did the right thing coming to me." And then something in me shifted. I didn't want revenge anymore. Revenge was small. I wanted justice. I wanted him exposed, not just as a cheater, but as the man he really was, a manipulator who fed off loyalty and naivety, like oxygen. So I said it out loud before I even had time to doubt myself. "We're not confronting him alone." Emily blinked.
We.
"I'm going to find every woman he lied to, and we're going to do it together." Her eyes widened with both fear and relief. Because she wasn't alone anymore either. I walked out of that cafe taller, steadier, reborn not from love, but from ruin. Over the next week, Emily and I dug
Hard.
She contacted the other 2 women. I used old phone data, shared account archives, small suspicious details that suddenly made sense. Turned out there weren't just 3 women. There were 6. 6 women he fed lies to like they were vitamins, absorbing their attention, their affection, their time, their hope. 6 lives he played with like they were interchangeable. 6 hearts he stretched thin while coming home to me and kissing me goodnight. When we gathered, all of us, in Emily's small living room the following Saturday, the air felt electric. Payne sat in that room like a guest of honor. Different faces, different ages, same story, same man. He didn't just betray me. He created a constellation of grief. One woman, older than me, said quietly, "He told me you were abusive, that you threatened him." Another whispered, "He said you stole money from him." Another, "He said he married you out of obligation." Obligation. a word that cut deeper than knives. I listened as they shared the versions of me he invented. A villain in some stories, a sad, desperate wife in others. He didn't just cheat.
Here he wrote me.
Piece by piece, lie by lie. And when they finished, I stood, heart steady, voice strong. He didn't break me, I said. He built me. Every time he lied, he sharpened something inside me. We are not victims. We are witnesses. And he is going to face all of us. We didn't shout. We didn't scream. We planned. Calmly. Methodically. The confrontation wasn't going to be chaos. It was going to be truth in its purest form. And when the day came, when we all walked toward the house he still thought he owned, I didn't feel fear. I felt power. We knocked. He opened the door, expecting only me. His face strained when he saw them behind me like ghosts he thought he buried.
I didn't have to speak.
The silence of 6 betrayed women spoke louder than any accusation. But I did speak, soft, lethal. You thought you could play every woman in your life and still walk away whole. Today, you learn what it feels like to be seen. His mask cracked. His posture collapsed. And for the first time since this began, I saw him afraid. Not afraid to lose me. Afraid to lose control. But this story isn't ending here. Because what happened next wasn't screaming or tears. It was something colder. Something he never expected from me. A final twist. One he never saw coming. Because while he spent years deceiving women, I spent months preparing for the moment he would lose everything. And trust me, he did. Now tell me, do you want to hear how we dismantled his life piece by calculated piece, without ever raising our voices? After we left his house that day, the world felt simultaneously enormous and razor-thin, like a stage where every visible light was suddenly focused on him, and the rest of us were left in the wings, watching him squirm under a heat he never earned. I thought exposing him would feel like victory, like an explosion that would burn everything to ash and leave me standing on the other side clean and victorious. It didn't. It felt quieter, colder, like a deliberate unmasking that revealed more of his pathetic smallness than anything dramatic. The real work began after the confrontation. Paperwork, lawyers, bank appointments, late-night strategy sessions over burnt coffee at Emily's kitchen table. I had expected the legal machinery to be mechanical, a sequence of forms and signatures. I hadn't expected the human reckoning. I hadn't expected the way people we thought were on our side would take a step back when the ugliness smelled like contagion. I hadn't expected the way some friends would pick a side because it was easier than facing the truth we offered them. But none of that mattered as much as the plan we had crafted. We didn't want to humiliate him in public for the sake of spectacle. We wanted consequences that fit the crime, financial transparency, emotional accountability, and a public undoing of the story he'd been spinning for years. We pooled evidence, screenshots, timestamps, hotel receipts, emails he thought he deleted, the little things that, assembled like bones, made a skeleton no lie could drape over. I had always been private, but privacy was a currency he used to hide. I decided he would never use it again as a shield. The first strike was practical, freezing joint accounts, moving our shared assets into separate trusts, a quiet but surgical removal of the scaffolding he'd been leaning on. I didn't want to bankrupt him. I wanted him to feel the smallness of living without the conveniences his selfishness had bought. When the lawyers came with papers, he argued. "This is excessive," he said, voice pleading. "You're overreacting." He sounded exactly like the man who rationalized everything. I handed him a folder with messages he'd sent to Ava last year, when he'd called me cold and suffocating and promised her forever. He turned pale and finally shut up. Financial consequences were satisfying in a tight, pragmatic way, but they didn't heal the nights I'd spent whispering to the ceiling while his side of the bed was warm. For that, I wanted public truth. Not for humiliation, though there was a slice of pleasure in that, but because truth is a mirror. If you let it live only inside your head, it collapses into doubt. If you set it free, other people can see it and confirm what your heart already knew. We organized a meeting. Not a spectacle, but a necessary public accounting. We called his colleagues, his family, the women, and the neighbors. We asked for witnesses who could attest to how he presented himself. He sat across from us in a room half empty of moral courage. As we began, I felt the old muscle memory of calmness settle over me. I told the story like the patient surgeon I'd become: dates, messages, places. Not for vengeance, but for clarity. One by one, people who had been fooled by his charm nodded, mouths opening in that small astonishment that only real deception creates. "I thought he was a wonderful man," my sister admitted, voice small. "He volunteered at my kid's school. He brought casseroles. I never imagined. But here's the thing about tenderness: it doesn't excuse cruelty. The world loves a good liar because liars are easy to love. They feed you what you want to hear. They are smooth. They are practiced. Exposing the mechanism behind the performance is like watching the magician take apart his boxes. The wonder disappears." The next twist was not mine, though I had set the stage for it. Ava, who had once been my closest friend and now sat across from me like a pale echo, reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. Her hand shook. "I thought I knew everything," she said quietly. "I thought he loved me because he told me I was worthy. I believed I deserved to hurt you." She looked at me, and the look she gave was not guilt as much as the kind of grief that is a new mask for an old emptiness. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were receipts, hotel bookings, money transfers, a string of payments showing him funneling cash to her by stealth. There were also pictures: Ava, with a different look in her eyes, and him, with a face that wanted to be anyone but himself. "I thought I was getting revenge," she said. "I thought breaking you would make my life make sense. Instead, I woke up one morning realizing I'd become the thing I hated." Her admission was brutal and unexpected because it wasn't the theatrical confession you see in movies. It was raw. Turning her vulnerability into evidence helped me more than it hurt. She had provided the ledger of their transactions, and that ledger painted a picture of deliberate control. Him trying to buy her loyalty, her acquiescence, her silence. It explained the why behind the cruelty. He didn't just have affairs. He invested in them like a project. After that, the dominoes fell. The women who had been hurt by him stood up and demanded he right what he had wronged. He scrambled to justify himself with the same tired rhetoric. He was confused, he had needs, he had been lonely. No one listened. The legal settlement was cleaner than I expected. It didn't make me rich. It took his access to our shared investments and secured them so that I would never have to rely on him again. That felt monumental. But the final blow to his carefully constructed world came from a place neither of us anticipated: his professional life. When I began to pull at the string of his double life, I found threads that led to more than infidelity. There were expenses coded as professional development that were clearly for personal liaisons. There were meetings listed where no meetings had been held. I provided those documents to his firm, not out of malice, but because the pattern suggested ethical breaches. His employer launched an inquiry. What started as an exposure of private wrongdoing became a corporate integrity investigation. He lost projects. He lost trust built over a decade. In the end, he kept a roof over his head because that's the kind of man who can't imagine being truly, utterly stripped of dignity. But dignity without trust is a slippery thing. There, and then not there anymore. People who once called him for barbecues returned my messages. Old friends sent notes that were equal parts apology and distance. I learned which relationships were transactional and which were durable. That realization was another kind of healing. But here's the part that hurt the most and surprised me at the same time: the way the women who'd confronted him together began to heal each other. We didn't rush truth into therapy and call it reconciliation. We had coffee, messy, imperfect conversations. We cried more than we argued. We share recipes and bad jokes and appointment reminders, mundane things that stitch a life back together. We formed a little tribe, women who had been lied to by the same man, and in that commonality found something oddly fierce and compassionate. Ava and I took turns sitting in silence when one of us needed space. Emily surprised us all by hosting a potluck where we laughed so hard we forgot to cry for a few hours. One of the other women, Carla, started a blog about rebuilding. The anonymity allowed her to be brutal and honest and comforting to people she had never met. The law and the banknotes had given me safety, but those late-night texts and calls gave me what safety never will: the knowledge that my heart could still connect. I dated, awkwardly, at first. I went on long hikes alone. I painted. I learned to find myself in the spaces he had once occupied. And then came the last twist, the one that changed everything in a way I hadn't planned. One morning, months later, a plain envelope arrived in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a small key and a note in his handwriting, not asking for forgiveness, not begging, simply stating, "You were right to leave." The key fits the storage unit by the marina. Use it if you want to see what I was keeping. At first, I thought about burning the note. I thought about throwing it away, the way I threw away his shirts, and a framed picture no longer felt like my memory, but a relic of a lie. But something in me was curious in the way that curiosity is a moral imperative. I drove to the marina. The storage unit number matched. The lock clicked open in my hand, like a small ceremony. Inside was a tidy stack of boxes: letters, trinkets, a jewelry box I didn't recognize, souvenirs from places he'd never brought me. There were also notebooks, his handwriting looping, honest in the way writing can be when you think no one will ever read it. I read until the sun moved across the sky and a weird, gentle understanding settled in my chest. The notebooks weren't apologies. They were notations of his loneliness, his cowardice, the rationalizations he used to absolve himself in the dark. He had written things like, "I'm terrified she'll leave and I'll be alone and worth nothing. I deserve what I have, but I don't deserve to be fixed. I'm ashamed. I wanted to tell you everything, then run away." It was a confession without redemption, a map of a man who understood himself poorly. It hurt, but not like betrayal. It hurt like seeing a person you thought invincible shrink into a sad, scared child. I took the key and the notebooks, and I burned only one letter, the one addressed to Ava, where he promised her she was the reason he stayed awake at night. I burned it because some things deserve to be dust, not trophies.
The rest I kept.
Not for him, but as proof that I trusted my instincts. That I had been right. That sometimes a woman's suspicion is a lighthouse, not a curse. Life after that was quieter. People assumed I would rage, that I would spend nights planning revenge stories meant for late-night television. Instead, I spent evenings learning to sleep alone again, without the ghost of his breath beside me. I bought a plant and kept it alive. I answered messages from women who said they found solace in our story. I volunteered on weekends, not because I wanted redemption, but because I wanted to fill my time with people who needed something I could give without being asked to shrink. He tried to apologize in the small, clumsy ways cheaters do. Texts that arrived at 3 a.m. when your loneliness is a soft animal looking for warmth. He tried to call. He sent flowers once that I left unpicked in a vase until the petals dropped. I told him once over the phone and then never again, "You taught me what I don't want. Thank you." It was compassion, not pity. He tried to argue for a future together. I shook my head and hung up. There are things you can forgive for the sake of growth, and things you can't for the sake of survival. Some bridges you burn to stop others from following you into the same fire. Months bled into a year. I accepted an invitation to speak at a small event about emotional recovery and boundaries. I shared the barest outline of our story and listened as heads nodded, women mouthing small words of recognition like prayers. Afterward, a woman approached me and pressed a small handwritten note into my palm. It said simply, "You were brave for choosing yourself." It was the first time I let anyone call me brave without flinching. We are taught to think that leaving is an instant triumph, like a one-line climax in a movie. In truth, it's 1,000 little choices made each morning: to not answer his messages, to change the locks, to show up for therapy, to eat when the world tastes metallic with grief. The end, for me, wasn't dramatic. It was practical. It was buying locks and changing beneficiaries and learning to laugh inside again. It was Ava and I meeting once in a year at a diner and sharing pancakes like two women who had walked through fire and survived with different scars. She apologized then in a way that was more about her owning her choices than seeking my permission to be forgiven. I accepted the apology the same way I accept sunlight, carefully, suspiciously, but gladly. As for him, he is a man who lives in a town we both still pass through sometimes in errands, but our paths no longer cross. He found other puzzled hearts to warm in his orbit, and I found people who warmed mine without conditions. The last small twist is this. Years after everything, I ran into Emily at a farmer's market. She hugged me like family and then, with a conspiratorial smile, said, "Do you remember that night at the cafe?" I laughed. "Of course." "I never told you," she said, lowering her voice like she feared someone would overhear our complicity, "that finding you saved me too. I was so lost. You gave me a map." We stood in the aisle between the tomatoes and the baker, sun on our faces, and I knew that the life I had rebuilt wasn't empty at all. It was filled with women who had been broken by the same man and chose to fix themselves anyway. There was no cinematic revenge. There was no dramatic public humiliation that left him on the street. There was only careful unmaking and patient rebuilding. And that, in its slow, stubborn way, is its own kind of finality. So when people ask me if I'm satisfied, my answer is complicated. I am satisfied that I chose myself. I am satisfied that the man who thought he could play with people learned that lies compound and eventually topple whatever empire they try to sustain. I am not satisfied in the way that revenge movies make you feel when the villain is vanquished. I'm satisfied in the way a woman is satisfied when she finally remembers how to sleep without waiting for footsteps that will never come back. I am still healing. I am still learning how to love someone else again in a way that is brave and honest and not terrified of being enough. I still have the scars. Some show, some are the quiet kinds that only appear in the dark when the moon is testing your courage. But I don't resent them. They remind me how fierce and pragmatic I can be. And if there is one lesson I want to leave you with, it's this. Betrayal is not the end of a woman's story. It's one chapter that, if survived, teaches you exactly who you are when every comfortable thing is taken away. You learn your edges. You learn how to be alone without being lonely. You learn that loyalty to yourself is louder than anyone else's promises. Now I'll ask you what I always ask at the end of these gatherings, because the only way to keep this pain from being private and poisonous is to make it universal and active. What would you do if the person you trusted most turned out to be building a secret life right under your roof?